Boy, it's about that time of day again here, kids. Welcome back, welcome back. Joseph James, School of Trade, Sideways Markets. It is the 3rd of March already. In like a lion, out like a lamb. Welcome back to the month of March. Didn't we just have January? Is it already the 3rd month of the year? Time flies when you're getting snow and sleet and hail and cold weather. Hope you guys are staying warm out there. Another storm hitting the east coast of the U.S. Again, I'll tell you, that Mother Nature, she's got a strange sense of humor. She just keeps on pounding us. But you know what I always say, right? Good things always come out of pressure. Look at gold, right? Good things always come out of pressure. Look at diamonds. Good things come out of pressure. Something big's going to come out of this. Manufacturing started to make a big comeback here today. So, welcome back to our newsletter, boys and girls. Monday evening, question for you. What does Andrew Carnegie, Vladimir Putin, $1.1 trillion, and NASCAR, what does all that have in common? Well, you better stick around if you don't know the answer to that, because we're going to cover that here for tonight's newsletter. You know how it goes. We'll start out first by taking a look at what happened today. We'll take a look at this day in history. We'll look at what's happening tomorrow. And then before we're done, we're going to roll those sleeves up, grab some charts, because we're traders. We're not just hanging out and having fun. We're here to make some money. So stick around for part number 2 of this video series. This newsletter has 2 parts. The second part will be at the bottom of this page on our blog. So don't forget about the chart prep. Now, last week we made some great money using the chart prep that I gave you guys last week. Stick around for some more tonight. Now, what happened today in the markets? Well, if you hadn't turned on a television set, or if you weren't around at the end of last week, you probably don't know what's happening out there right now. So let me bring you up to speed. Welcome back to planet Earth. We have Russia. Now, Russia has sent, I've heard a bunch of different numbers. I've heard over 100,000. I've heard over 15,000 troops have been sent to the Crimea region of Ukraine. Now, let's take a little bit of history here. Crimea is a part of Ukraine. Ukraine and Russia used to be part of the old Soviet Union. When that, of course, fell apart, Ukraine and Russia became separate countries. Vladimir Putin, right, has been quoted as saying that Ukraine was the little Russia. I would equate a war between Russia and Crimea, or Russia and Ukraine, very similar to in some ways, into our civil war here in the United States, right? Brothers fighting brothers, neighbors fighting neighbors. This is a country that used to be the same country, right? Make no mistake. The people of Russia, the people of Ukraine are not behind this. You know who's behind this. And Mr. Putin loves to throw his weight around. You know, I was just talking to a friend of mine here in the office this afternoon, and of course this issue happening between Russia and Ukraine is what's pushing crude oil higher. So if you woke up this morning and you were going, what? Why did crude jump 2%? Why did we move $2 in price on crude today? It's because of the concerns over the supply channels going from Russia to Europe. And of course, whenever anybody thinks of the word crude, they immediately think of lack of supply, too much demand, and price usually jumps. Very rarely do we have a whiff of crude oil and then price falls. Usually it's a knee-jerk reaction that price jumps up. It's because all of us, whether we like it or not, we are tied to the price of crude oil, right, per barrel, whether we like it or not. All right, so that's why we have this inherent nature to buy up crude when news gets tough. Well, bottom line is today, crude jumps 2.05%, just shy of that 105 even level. And of course, this came after more and more reports that started to get pretty serious. You know, last week we thought, oh, this will blow over. But this week, I'll tell you, there were threats from I can't recall what department inside Russia, but basically threats were, if you don't turn over your arms, right, we're going to, I believe the term was, get ready for a storm, right? A Russian storm. That doesn't sound very good now, does it? Sounds like a Rocky movie. And that reminds me, you know, I grew up in the United States, my early 30s, and when I was young, the popular culture was to paint Russia as a bad guy. It was. And as an adult, we're able to basically make up our own opinions. But I'll tell you, it's really difficult and disappointing. And I'm being very honest as a human being, as a United States citizen, that I'm always somebody who believes in giving somebody the chance to tell me who they are rather than letting some online review or letting some movie portray who these people really are. But I'll tell you right now, growing up in the United States, we were always painted Russia being the bad guy, right? Look at all the movies, all the pop culture, right? Those glares of that Russian accent, right? Now, obviously, if you weren't raised in the United States, you probably don't have that experience. But what was interesting was, as I'm watching the as I'm watching the Olympics in Sochi, and I'm hearing about the Russian Olympic Committee basically buying athletes, right? They basically did. They said, well, you won't play with them, you play with us now, we'll accept you as a member, whatever your opinions are on that. But now we continue to see Putin and the rest of his thugs throwing their weight around in Ukraine, and I'm going, man, such a powerful country as Russia, they could be using this leverage for good. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and I'm disappointed right now that they're making it very difficult for us to change our viewpoint of Russia. They're making it very difficult for us to have an open mind to Russia in the future, because apparently it doesn't matter who their leader is. It doesn't matter who's running their army. Apparently Russia's policy is if we're bigger than you, we're going to push our weight around. So there have been threats back and forth, and it's amazing because the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian government have basically said, hey, we're not trying to do anything wrong here. So it's a very interesting scenario developing right now. As of this time last week, I would have put money on the fact it was going to blow over. It was a political stunt they were using here, but apparently there's a little bit more than meets the eye. Now, of course, we're going to continue to watch this the rest of the week. The rest of the week, though, we may continue to see this interrupt our day. So whenever we have something like this in the recent past, it's been government shutdown, it's been debt ceiling, it's been bailouts, right? There are always going to be, every few months, going to be something that interrupts us. This is something, though, that will continue most likely the rest of the week here. And we saw a very good example of how quickly these markets can react once the market participants take it seriously. I didn't take it seriously last week. That's why I joked around about it. But now going into this week, it's saddening. I'm disappointed by the way that we have to still use sticks and stones to get our way in this sophisticated society that we live in. But hey, what do I know, right? I'm just a lonely old day trader here. So Russia continues its occupation of Crimea. That's what's resulting in a lot of this turmoil right now you're seeing in the market. China had some major manufacturing news come out over the weekend, over Sunday night, hit an 8-month low. Now, the manufacturing number that you want to remember is 50. The number for manufacturing is 50. We just saw a 53 number in our manufacturing here in the U.S. this last month. 53.2, China just hit 50.2. So 50.2 was the Chinese manufacturing index. That's an 8-month low. And remember, what happens out of China for manufacturing is going to trickle into the rest of the emerging markets in Asia. It's going to trickle all the way back to our larger economies in Europe, right, Australia, and the U.S. What was very interesting, though, I was talking to a client of mine a few days ago, and he owns a manufacturing company, like a clothing company here in the United States, here in Los Angeles. And he had just reached the point where it was too expensive to do business in China, and he brought all of his business back to the U.S. And I thought that was just remarkable to see that the demand of Chinese manufacturing had hit its peak many years ago. Remember, between the years of, 1995 and 2005, the economy in China, quadrupled, or it grew by a substantial amount when manufacturing was growing. Now the costs and the risks, there's a lot of risks doing business in China for obvious reasons. Just think about some of the possible things that could go wrong in a country that treats their people like livestock. And of course, the Chinese manufacturing now hitting an 8-month low. I saw that this morning when I came in, and I immediately thought about my buddy John, who was complaining about the fact that it was more expensive to outsource now. And so he brought he brought his people back to the United States. So a definite good thing here for the U.S. manufacturing and the U.S. economy, right? We've always been a little bit upset here as consumers were upset that we're shipping jobs overseas. But, the reason why is because of capitalism. And, of course, if you don't want to see jobs get shipped overseas, make yourself more valuable. That was what I always thought. But, again, good to see here, though, that the U.S. starting to grab back some of those manufacturing jobs. I won't lie to you. I'm definitely rooting for the U.S. every step of the way. So Chinese manufacturing, it's an 8-month low. That's what pushed gold higher this morning. If you were wondering, we came in, we saw gold jumping up, we saw crude gapped up, and we saw Russell gap down. So we're wondering what happened here. Well, of course, the manufacturing here out of China, that's also going to push the equities lower because that signals a possible slowdown in the global economy. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but that's what affected the markets this morning. News out of Russia, news out of China. That's what caused that big gap up overnight, or gap down if you're trading E-minis. So this is important stuff, guys. This is really important stuff because as we go through the rest of this week here, I've got no major news tomorrow. These are going to continue to be some themes that we're going to run through the rest of the week here this week. Personal income here in the U.S. today rises 0.3%, exceeding expectations. What you're going to see the next couple days is we're going to start seeing news reports that are referencing February instead of January and December. And what that basically means for us is we should finally be seeing that bad weather impact behind us. That is, of course, if Mother Nature gives us a break here anytime soon. So personal income rises, ISM manufacturing also rises. Now, this is that number I was talking about earlier. Remember, the manufacturing number you want to remember is 50. We just saw 53.2 today on the ISM manufacturing, which is a big improvement from a very depressed, remember the bad weather in January, 51.3 in January. So that definitely suggests here that we have a nice rebound happening here in the manufacturing sector, which we thought was going to happen, but we're wondering when we'd see it. Construction spending, pretty much flat month to month. Construction spending didn't get that boost that we thought we'd get from construction spending, but year over year, though, we're still looking very, very good. So this news out of Russia and China really kind of dampened the party on this, what for the most part was very positive news today coming out of the U.S. So today we saw big moves in crude higher, big moves in gold higher, and a relatively small pullback on the mini Russell, the equity markets. They really had a difficult time getting out of this little rut they were in this morning here. The big mover though today, though, gold, 243 ticks, 227 ticks there for crude oil. Now, moving forward here, this day in history, one of my favorite times of a newsletter, March 3rd, 1845. The state of Florida joins the U.S. as the 27th state of the Union. And no surprise here, 100 years later, NASCAR is born. Coincidence? I don't think so. I'm not saying anything. My neck's pretty red out back there, too. I grew up in New England. March 3rd, 1847. My boy, Alexander Graham Bell, the father of the telephones, born in Scotland. 1847. Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. 1867, this is pretty cool. The U.S. Secretary of State William H. Seward agrees to purchase the Alaskan territories from Russia for $7 million. Could you imagine if you could buy Alaska right now for $7 million? Yeah. There are houses on the beach in Alaska for $10 million, right? So you can see here, just a little bit of a deal there if I get that at $7 million. Now, it was funny because at the time, they laughed at William Seward, right, calling it what? The Seward's folly, right? Thinking that buying Alaska would be a waste of time. Well, I'll tell you right now, it doesn't take a lot of research to know that was not a waste of time. What a great deal. It's too bad they didn't buy Crimea, right? Maybe they should have bought Crimea. A little bit better beaches in Crimea. But then again, we could deal with Russia right now. Something tells me they're not going to fight us for Alaska. March 3rd, 1901. This is pretty impressive. Now, this will take your calculators out for this one, guys. J.P. Morgan and Andrew Carnegie, they team up. It was actually J.P. Morgan buying Andrew Carnegie's company, but they team up to form the first billion-dollar corporation. Now, at that time, 1901, $1.4 billion in value. Now, think about that number. $1.4 billion is a ton of money today. It'll be a ton of money 50 years from now. Imagine 100 years ago. Now, just to give you an idea of how much money that was 7% of the U.S. GDP. 7% of the gross domestic product in 1901. It was 4 times the budget of our U.S. government. It's incredible. Now, I took the liberty to do some math, right? And of course, we have about, 115 trillion GDP as of today. You can go to gdp.gov or something like that and find the information online. If you take 7% of that, $1.1 trillion. That means that if JP Morgan and Andrew Carnegie were to do that again today, that 1.4 billion would be worth 1.1 trillion. Now, trillion, I mean, it could be a gajillion, right? What does that mean? Well, here's a little bit of comparison. Apple, right? The world's largest company right now. How much is Apple worth right now? Well, at its peak, it was about 660 billion. Well, now add another 100 billion and you've got 1.1 trillion. So that gives you an idea of just how much of a stud JP Morgan and Andrew Carnegie, how much they were, right? $1.1 trillion today. Quite a bit of money. Makes Apple look like a little tiny popsicle stand, doesn't it? And then, of course, we can't forget about our national anthem, 1931, Star Spangled Banner, adopted as our national anthem. And then, of course, 1991, right? This one hits close to home. The world is shocked by the very public viewing caught on videotape of a Los Angeles truck driver by the name of Rodney King Jr. This, of course, sparked the civil rights movements. It began the Los Angeles riots, right? Take the time, learn more about that time in our history here, kids. If you don't know about Rodney King Jr., it's important that you do, right? No matter where you come from. So this day in history, quite a bit of cool history today. I think the coolest thing, though, here was that JP Morgan, Andrew Carnegie, right? Worth more than what Apple would have been worth. 7% of the U.S. GDP. That's pretty cool stuff. Pretty cool stat there. What about tomorrow? Looking at news for tomorrow, we have no major news on the U.S. schedule for tomorrow. That means by the time we come in tomorrow morning in the U.S. session, we're going to be looking at developments in Russia and Ukraine, as well as reaction to any of the news that happened overnight. Now, we don't have a lot to work with for tomorrow. Tomorrow's one of those barren news days. So we got 4:30 tomorrow morning. We got construction spending out of Great Britain. And then we got to wait all the way until tomorrow night for 6:15. That should be 6:15. Not sure where 6:16 came from. But tomorrow night, we've got out of Japan. We got 2 news reports tomorrow night at 6:15. We got PMI index. We're going to hear from the Australians. We got GDP tomorrow night at 7:30, and at 8:45 tomorrow night. This will be the headline number. You've got PMI, some more manufacturing numbers coming out of China. So no major news on the schedule for us tomorrow in the U.S. session. But you do have that 4:30 a.m. construction spending out of Great Britain. That will be great for all you European traders. And then tomorrow night, we'll talk more about the news coming out of China tomorrow night. So markets getting shaken up here by the events coming out of Russia and Ukraine. Chinese manufacturing slowing things down. As I look at my charts here, I see a straight line up on crude. I see a straight line up on gold. And as you can see here, we've got that slight pullback here on the Russell. Now, we are just getting this party started here, guys. So don't go dropping off yet. Don't go leaving me yet. Let's grab some of these charts. Let's grab our anchor charts, our VIP charts, and let's get ready for tomorrow. Because I'm going to find some levels. I don't know how I'm going to use those levels tomorrow. Remember, we don't predict. We always react. And right now, what a great example today. I don't need to know what's happening next. I just have to be here, waiting, and prepared technically to capitalize on whatever comes out the gate. Are you ready for this? Let's keep going. Don't die on me yet. We got some charts to look at and be ready for a Tuesday morning. Let's get started.